Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our sixth Brain Matters webinar series, Evaluating Progress, Reasons for Hope in Alzheimer's Diagnosis and Treatment with Dr. Sharon Cohen. My name is Dina Boone, Public Education Coordinator with the Alzheimer's Society, London and Middlesex. I will be the MC and moderator of today's webinar. Susan Oster, Coordinator, Dementia Friendly Communities, will be our technical support person today. At the Alzheimer's Society, our role is not only to provide programs and services to people who are going through the journey of dementia, but also to provide dementia education and to advocate for those living with cognitive disabilities. Before we begin, I have a little business to go over relating to the webinar experience. Please note that your cameras are off and microphones are muted for the webinar. This event is being recorded and will be available in the future on our website. At the end of the presentation, we will have approximately 15 minutes for a moderated Q&A session. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. During the presentation, if you have any questions for Dr. Cohen, please add them to the Q&A box. If you would like your question to be anonymous, please click the Send Anonymous box before clicking the Send button. You may need to move your mouse around at the bottom of your screen or top of your screen, depending on your device, to find the icon. If you are listening to the webinar on your phone and you have a question, feel free to call me at 519-680-2404, extension 247, or email me at dboone@alzheimerlondon.ca. You will also find my email address in the confirmation message which you received when you registered for this webinar. I will be sure to pass on any questions you may have along to Dr. Cohen after the presentation webinar. If you are having any technical concerns, or if you would like to communicate with myself or Susan, please type in the chat box. You may need to move your mouse around to find these little icons on your screen. And you can submit your comments in the chat box to all attendees and panelists, which will be viewable by everyone. And if you do just panelists, then it's just only seen by myself and Susan and Dr. Cohen and Justine. Please note that the opinions expressed by participants are their own and are not necessarily representative of the Alzheimer's Society of London and Middlesex. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Sharon Cohen. Dr. Cohen is a neurologist and the medical director of the Toronto Memory Program, a community-based medical facility for diagnosis and treatment for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Dr. Cohen is known for her excellence in patient care, teaching, advocacy, and clinical research. She is a consultant and advisor to a wide range of stakeholders in the field of dementia and is passionate about improving outcomes for individuals with Alzheimer's disease in a practical and meaningful way. And now, please welcome Dr. Sharon Cohen.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dina, for the introduction and for inviting me. I'll just tee up my slides here. Okay, I'm hoping that you're seeing these. Please let me know if you're not. So we'll begin. I would like to leave you with a sense of knowledge and hope about the future for what has been a terrible disease with a poor track record in terms of diagnosis and treatment to date. So let's begin. Here are my disclosures. I am a consultant, an advisor, and often a steering committee member to all stakeholders who are interested in the future of Alzheimer's disease and improving outcomes. And this includes pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, government, not-for-profit organizations. I receive no personal fees for this work. And some of the groups that I'm a consultant to include the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation, the Conference Board of Canada, and a variety of pharma and biotech companies. As far as clinical research, I'm heavily involved in clinical research, have been for the last 25 years, and receive research grants to conduct research. All of the grants go to the institution, and I'm not an owner of the institution. I receive no personal fees for this work. And you see some of the companies, AbbVie, Aging Bio, Elector, etc., whom we run clinical trials in collaboration with. I hold no patents, no stocks or shares, either personally or through any family members. My objectives today are, number one, to introduce you to Toronto Memory Program. Number two, to provide an update on the latest research related to Alzheimer's disease, diagnosis and treatment. To touch very briefly on research in other types of dementia, since this is a common question if I focus only on Alzheimer's disease. And finally, to ponder, very importantly, the system change that will be needed once we have breakthroughs in diagnosis and treatment. So to begin, what is Toronto Memory Program? We are an independent memory clinic founded by me in 1996, and we are a research site for Alzheimer's and related dementia trials. We're located in Toronto. We are a single site with a multidisciplinary team of people in family medicine, neurology, geriatric trainees, and a large number of other specialists, occupational therapists, nurses, clinical research professionals. We are Canada's largest memory clinic, and we see over 1,500 new patients per year in our memory clinic, and we continue to follow those who have come to us over the years in addition to the new patients. We are the most active dementia clinical trial site in Canada and the most regularly awarded with new research. We have an international reputation for excellence in research and clinical care. And our program, even though it's independent, meaning it operates outside the university and outside of a hospital, we are OHIP funded on the memory clinic side. And on the research side, we're funded by research grants. So there's no private pay. This is not a clinic like the Cleveland Clinic or Medicis or MedCan. This is all paid through research grants or OHIP. We are a partner site of the Headlands family of research sites. We're a member of the Global Alzheimer'S Platform. We're only one of 2 Canadian sites who are a member of both of these groups, and also a member of the Society for Clinical Research Sites, which is an international group of research sites. We need a physician referral for individuals to come to our memory clinic, but no referral required for individuals who may be interested in a research option. And we, in fact, have a telephone line and information line on the research side, and people can contact us directly, or family members can contact on behalf of someone they care about or a friend even, and there's no referral required for that. We have no restriction to catchment area. We see people from all over Ontario and out of province. And local care, whatever care you may receive or access in the London, Middlesex area or elsewhere, is not jeopardized by receiving care at or joining a research program at Toronto Memory Program. So I wanted to make those points clear, and I think that this is in keeping with guidance from Dina and Susan, that this would be helpful and avoid any confusion or questions about where we sit. And at the end of my presentation, you will see a slide that illustrates our contact information, phone and email, and the 2 individuals who will happily reach back out to you if you have questions or interests you want to proceed with us. So what's new in Alzheimer's disease research? And we'll start first with diagnosis. And in order to understand diagnosis, I want to review things that are a little bit familiar, unfortunately familiar to all of us. In 1906, when Dr. Alwa Alzheimer first described this disease, it was thought to be a rare disease. And although his first patient was only 51 years old, and we've learned a lot about her recently from DNA evidence, from pathologic slides left over from 1906 of her brain, at the time, this was considered rare and people didn't really know what to make of this. In 2021, we recognize this is a pandemic that will long outlive the COVID-19 pandemic. It affects people from all walks of life, and generally symptoms start over the age of 65. However, about 8%, up to 8% of those with Alzheimer's disease start their symptoms under the age of 65. And these are called individuals with young onset or early onset Alzheimer's disease. The disease is challenging at any age, whether you're a senior or a young person. There are differences in the way it will impact you depending on the age at which this disease strikes. It may affect employment, child rearing, financial responsibilities more in younger people at the height of their career. But again, just important to know that it is not exclusively a disease of seniors. In 2012, the World Health Organization declared Alzheimer's disease to be an urgent healthcare priority, in part because the numbers were staggering and growing. We have 50 million people around the world with dementia, the majority of those having Alzheimer's disease, and this is rising and will reach 150 million by 2050 unless we arrest this disease. The disease is not benign. It causes great hardship and loss of function to patients, great hardship to their families, and it is accompanied by a severe vulnerability, which has been accentuated during the COVID-19 pandemic, where people who are disabled and living in nursing homes are particularly at risk for COVID and other unfortunate situations. The cost of care is enormous for Alzheimer's disease. It is more expensive than heart disease and cancer combined. That's something that people often don't recognize. And it is seriously underdiagnosed. Only about 50% of individuals actually receive a diagnosis. And this diagnosis, when it is made, comes after several years of trying to get a doctor's attention and several years into symptoms. Some of the diagnostic challenges will resonate with you folks. Individuals may not recognize and report their own symptoms. They may be in denial, but more often they are not aware. This disease robs people of their ability to really judge how they're doing. And individuals, even with significant memory problems, may not realize they have a problem. Others are acutely aware there's a problem, but they're fearful of coming forward and reporting this because of stigma, because of loss of independence. Maybe they'll lose their driver's license. A whole host of things may follow. The assessment tools are also insensitive by and large for the early stages of disease. And we lack a simple test, be it a blood test or other test, to give us confirmation of the diagnosis. So many physicians feel they can't be sure it's Alzheimer's disease and they avoid diagnosing because they're not sure and they don't know what to do about it. The diagnostic disclosure, even when a physician feels they're dealing with Alzheimer's disease, is an uncomfortable conversation often for physicians who don't feel skilled and don't feel they have enough to offer their patients. And it can be uncomfortable for patients and families as well. And hence we have this current unacceptable state of affairs where we underdiagnose people, we misdiagnose them, and we diagnose them late. And I state all of this because this is a major barrier to development of new treatments. When you can't identify the disease and can't identify it early, that will slow drug development efforts. We know that Alzheimer's disease is a very long disease, and the dementia phase is only the last 10 years. Dementia meaning people are not able to function independently because of loss of cognitive abilities. But the mild cognitive impairment stage, or the MCI stage of Alzheimer's disease, precedes that, lasts on average 5 years, and people have a recognizable memory or cognitive impairment, but they're still independent, banking, shopping, traveling, looking after their finances, their children, whatever it is that they would normally do. And then there's a very long preclinical stage where changes are going on in the brain, just like a cancer growing silently, but these changes in the brain have not reached a threshold where they're causing symptoms or a cognitive test to become abnormal. So a long disease, as with any other area of medicine, the earlier you can detect it, the better chance you have of doing something about it. Throughout the entire disease, two bad actors, two proteins are building up, the first being amyloid, and when it forms a clumping area in the brain, we call it plaque, amyloid plaque, and the other protein, tau. Amyloid seems to trigger tau once it reaches a certain level, and both of these proteins damage the brain. In the end, the brain loses millions of neurons. Neurons are brain cells, millions. And so treating the disease late is unlikely to be successful in returning an individual to normal function. There is just too much brain tissue lost. But now the whole thrust in diagnosis is to make the diagnosis in life, not at autopsy, and to make it early in the disease. And we have tools that allow us to do this. We have PET scans, so this is not a CAT scan or an MRI, PET scans with tracers that can identify amyloid. The substance that is seen at autopsy, we can see it at the very earliest stages of the disease. There is an approved PET scan tracer for clinical use in Canada, and there are several for research use. There is a tau tracer first approved within the last year in the USA for taucipir, not yet approved in Canada for clinical use, but many tau tracers in use, including at Toronto Memory Program for research purposes. Spinal fluid examination can show us amyloid and tau. Blood tests, retinal scans, these are the path forward for the future, and I'll just talk a little bit more about these. So with a PET scan here, you see an individual having the scan, and on your right, you see what the image of the brain, this is a slice of the brain reconstructed on PET imaging, and the red is amyloid. So this is a head full of amyloid. This is the disease. This is similar to seeing cancer pathology in a tissue biopsy. Now we are seeing in the living brain amyloid accumulation. And this can be detected, as I keep saying, early in the disease. This is not a phenomenon that occurs only at the end stage of the disease. With a tau tracer on a PET scan for tau, we can also see the accumulation of tau, abnormal tau, which you see in the lower panel in these red areas. And the middle panel for the normal scans and the upper three slices, that is off-label binding. That is not actually tau. That is a sort of artifact, but you see the dramatic presence of tau in the lower panels. Spinal taps we do regularly, almost every day in our clinic. This is an excellent way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease early, very early, even earlier than the PET amyloid scans can do it. And with one sample of spinal fluid, we measure amyloid and tau, unlike with PET scans where you would need to have two separate PET scans with two separate tracers. Diagnosis in the near future is moving towards even more accessible and less expensive methodology. The first blood test to aid in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease was released commercially in the USA in October of 2020. And while this is an expensive blood test using an expensive technology, it is a blood test, not a scan or a spinal tap, and it measures amyloid in the blood to predict levels in the brain. Over the next 1 to 2 years, we expect several other amyloid blood tests that may be still better than this first one, the Precivity's test. Tau measurement in the blood may actually be even better at predicting Alzheimer's disease than the amyloid test. And there will be still other blood biomarkers that tell us about brain cell loss. And this will help stage the disease. So again, many of the successes in cancer treatment have come about because of biomarkers that can tell you exactly whether the disease is present, the nature of the disease, and the staging of the disease. We are one of the sites validating retinal scans. The retina is the back of the eye, and it is the front of the brain. And amyloid that accumulates in the brain can actually be seen by very special cameras. They're called hyperspectral cameras that detect amyloid in the back of the eye. The validation study is well underway at Toronto Memory Program, and it is comparing amyloid seen in a retinal scan with that on PET amyloid imaging or spinal fluid. So it may be that our ophthalmology colleagues or optometry colleagues in the future will have a role to play in detecting Alzheimer's disease just the way they detect glaucoma and other eye diseases. We can also assess genetic markers. There are rare gene mutations that cause Alzheimer's disease, and we can diagnose these by blood tests in individuals who have the appropriate family history or someone with a young age of onset in the family, and the cost is covered. We are able to access cost coverage on behalf of that individual for this kind of blood test. Separate from these rare gene mutations that directly cause Alzheimer's disease and can lead us then to a clear diagnosis, there are risk genes that increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease, although they do not diagnose by themselves Alzheimer's disease. And the ApoE gene is the most common and important of the risk genes. We have been offering cheek swab tests free of charge at Toronto Memory Program for people who want to know if they have increased risk. This has been a very popular endeavor, and it often leads individuals, number one, to explore options to take better care of themselves, and number two, to join prevention studies or treatment studies if they carry a risk gene. The Spartan Cube is the smallest DNA analyzer in the world, and Spartan Bioscience, located in Ottawa, has been groundbreaking in its development of this DNA analyzer, which allows rapid assessment in the case of ApoE within just 1 hour in the clinic. And if you inherit one copy of ApoE4, which is the type of ApoE that confers higher risk for Alzheimer's, you have a threefold greater risk of developing Alzheimer's disease later in life. If you have 2 copies of ApoE4, the risk goes up 10 to 12-fold. And here you see on the lower left, Kathy Barrick, the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, really helping advocate and take the stigma and the myth out of getting genetic testing. She wanted to demonstrate this is not so bad. Have a cheek swab, be part of a research study if this will help you, if this will help your family, if this will help future generations. Spartan Bioscience has moved into the COVID-19 rapid assessment technology, and their Spartan Cube system for COVID-19 was approved by Health Canada in January 2021. So they are actually shelving for now, as of August, their ApoE Alzheimer's genetic testing. So if anybody's interested, there's a bit of a time limit on this, and avoid the rush. Just contact us. We are happy to provide you with a cheek swab for the ApoE Alzheimer's risk gene anytime this spring or summer. So that was a bit of a rundown on what's new in diagnosis. And please bear in mind that people who continue to say Alzheimer's disease can only be diagnosed at autopsy, that is old, outdated information. We can be very clear and very precise about whether one has the Alzheimer's changes in the brain. What about treatment? Well, the existing Alzheimer's medicines are simply not enough. We have had 2 classes of medications approved for Alzheimer's disease for 20 years now. And these 2 classes both deal with increasing symptom management, so modest benefit to symptoms. They do not prevent or slow the disease, and they focus on downstream boosting of chemicals that are deficient in Alzheimer's disease because so many brain cells have been lost already. So the first group deals with boosting acetylcholine, and the original drug was Aricept. It's generic, donepezil, galantamine, rivastigmine. Those are the three medications in this class of drugs that boost acetylcholine. Then there's one drug approved. It was approved in 2003 in Canada, memantine, which modulates a different neurotransmitter chemical called glutamate. These are important medications, but they are not enough. They, as I said, only give modest benefit to symptoms. They don't prevent the disease from progressing. None of them are approved for the earliest symptomatic stage of Alzheimer's, which is the mild cognitive impairment stage. And we've had no new treatments in 17 years. We're due for a breakthrough. There has been a lot of research going on in the last 17 years. It's not as if the field has been idle. And in the last year in particular, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been some exciting things happening. So I want to share these with you and to impart the idea that the drugs are getting more sophisticated. The clinical trial designs are also more sophisticated. And the investment in Alzheimer's research is increasing, which is very important because we've been very underfunded relative to cancer, stroke, heart disease over many years. Here's a complicated diagram of the Alzheimer's drug development pipeline. This is updated pretty much every year by Dr. Jeff Cummings. This was from July 2020. And just at a glance, you see the three phases of drug development. Some of us are more familiar with drug development phases because of the COVID vaccine. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, in the center of the concentric circles. So phase 3, if you have successful drugs in phase 3 that are safe and do what we want them to do, then companies developing these drugs take their molecules to the regulators, the FDA or Health Canada, and apply for marketing. Phase 1 is the earliest stage, and phase 2, the intermediate stage. The colors here represent drugs that tackle Alzheimer's disease in different ways. Some of them are biologics, some are injected, some tackle amyloid, some tackle tau, some tackle inflammation, some tackle neurodegeneration. So the color coding tells you something about the breadth of the pipeline of drugs. We are not putting our eggs in one basket. These are very important, diverse compounds that act on the disease in different ways that may work well in combination. If you look at the phase 3 compounds in the upper wedge in green, these are all red. They are all the anti-amyloid drugs that have survived to this point. And this is the important group I will talk briefly about next, because these are the ones most poised to come to the market. And these are all anti-amyloid compounds that have advanced this far. We know that Alzheimer's disease is a long disease. And as I've mentioned, the dementia phase is the last 10 years of the disease. It's important that we continue to have drugs to treat this phase of disease, but now we have many drug development programs dealing with mild cognitive impairment and even with prevention at the preclinical stage. And this is terribly important that we don't focus on one stage to the exclusion of the other. And going as early as prevention in preclinical Alzheimer's disease is only possible now because we can actually identify the disease even before symptoms with PET scans and spinal taps. I will first talk about Atocanama. This drug, as many of you know, is currently under review by regulators, the FDA, yes, but also the European Medicines Agency, the Japanese regulatory agency, and Brazil as well. So 4 regulators now are reviewing Atocanama. The submission of Atocanama by Biogen to these regulators was based on the successful outcome of one of the phase 3 studies, a large study called Study 302. And this was conducted in patients with mild cognitive impairment and mild Alzheimer's disease dementia. And those who were on the high dose arm of the study drug of Atocanama, 10 milligrams per kilogram delivered intravenously monthly, experienced 22% less decline in cognition and function, 40% less decline in daily activities, so much more likely to hang on to their ability to bank, to shop, to work, to engage in their hobbies, and 87% less emergence of psychiatric symptoms. And we know that Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It's a disease that affects all areas of cognition, daily function, and psychiatric or behavioral symptoms. So this is a very clear demonstration that across all of the important aspects of Alzheimer's disease at the early stage, we are showing reduction in progression or disease slowing for these important outcomes. There was dramatic clearance of amyloid from the brain, so target engagement was demonstrated in a dramatic way. And furthermore, downstream reduction in other pathologic processes such as tau development and brain cell loss was demonstrated. So tackling amyloid early also interfered with the pathology of the disease further down the road. The FDA, as I mentioned, is currently reviewing the Atocanama file. They've extended their decision-making date. It's called the PDUFA date to June 7, 2021. So in another couple of months, we will know what the FDA decides. And if approved, Atocanama will be the first drug to slow progression of Alzheimer's disease. It will be a game changer. It will also be the first drug to treat mild cognitive impairment and not just the Alzheimer's disease dementia stage. It will be the first drug given for Alzheimer's disease by intravenous. There are many biologics for cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, many other diseases given intravenously, even for migraine. This will be a first in Alzheimer's disease. It will be the first drug to require an amyloid test, so people can actually be sure of the diagnosis before they get treated. So this is a drug that reduces amyloid, so one needs to have amyloid as evidence of the disease before embarking on a prescription for this treatment. It will also be the first drug that requires MRI scans to be done periodically to monitor the disease. Some of you may be aware of controversy or confusion regarding Atocanama. This is a very, very complicated drug development story that has been going on with Atocanama under development since 2012 and the phase 3 studies since 2015. Two of the items that have caused confusion I will address here, of the two phase 3 studies that were performed, one was a positive study, that's study 302, but one was negative. Now, the FDA does not require two positive phase 3 studies for drug approval. However, it is important that the negative study be understood and explained so we know if it detracts from the positive results in the positive study. Now, this negative study was very carefully interrogated in collaboration with the FDA, and it was felt that the outcome of the study was negative because the participants received inadequate dosing. So their dose exposure, their ability to receive the high dose was curtailed, and that this accounts for the fact that they did not achieve the benefits seen in the high dose arm of the positive study. Another source of confusion and perhaps controversy, but more confusion, is that the FDA had an advisory committee meeting, and the advisory panel actually voted against Atocanama. What does that mean? Well, the FDA has been working with Biogen over many years to deal with the complexities of the Atocanama drug development story. As part of the FDA review for any drug, an advisory committee is formed, which has a period of time to review the dossier, not the extent of time that the FDA in general has reviewed it, and to give their opinion. It is a non-binding opinion, but it was a little bit odd in this situation of the Atocanama review because the structure of the advisory committee did not include Alzheimer's disease experts. They were excluded from the panel. And also, the advisory committee members objected to the fact that the FDA and Biogen had put out a joint briefing document ahead of the panel meeting. And this is a very common practice in oncology, but had not been done previously in neurology. So it set the stage for a rather awkward meeting. The FDA still approves drugs about 20% of the time when the advisory committee has voted against them, so the jury is still out. The FDA is currently reviewing additional data, and Biogen has responded to all of the concerns raised by the advisory committee and provided additional data as well at the FDA request. And so the original approval date, PDUFA date, was March 7th, and this has been extended to June 7th. It won't be extended beyond this because that the process at the FDA is to extend only once. Even if Atocanama is not approved, there are several other candidates in the treatment pipeline that look extremely promising. And as I mentioned before, the ones that are at the forefront are all anti-amyloid drugs. So lecanemab, formerly known as BAN2401, is the second anti-amyloid antibody to have shown positive results. In the phase 2 study, that's going back a few years now, it showed that it could slow cognitive decline by 47%. That's very significant, again, in a mild population. And it could completely clear amyloid plaque on PET scans. So this prompted the phase 3 study, the Clarity study, which is fully enrolled now and will read out sometime the end of next year. So we're very excited about that. And even more as exciting is the fact that this drug, lecanemab, is now being assessed in a prevention study. It's called the AHEAD study. It's for individuals who are earlier than mild cognitive impairment, who may be at risk for Alzheimer's disease by virtue of age. Maybe they have a close family member. Maybe they know they have an ApoE4 gene. So people who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease can enroll. We will be starting as one of the few Canadian sites in the next few months. We've already got a lineup of a few hundred people very interested. So please, if you are interested, let us know because this will move quickly once we get started. Dynamab, you may have heard of. This is a Lilly anti-amyloid drug. It made the headlines just last month, March 2021, because its phase 2 study, the Trailblazer study, showed up to 40% decline and consistent positive results in both cognitive and functional, all of its primary and secondary outcome measures, as well as being able to clear amyloid plaque very quickly with only a few treatments. And this, if we think forward to marketing, might allow people to have a few treatments, intravenous treatments, and then a break. Maybe several months where they don't need treatment anymore, and then resume treatment for a few treatments. So this trial, because of its positive results, has transitioned to a large phase 3 study. The enrollment is ongoing now. If anybody is interested, this is an important opportunity for people who have symptoms, either at the mild cognitive impairment stage or mild dementia stage. And again, a very, very promising approach. There are many other disease-modifying treatment programs enrolling, and because of time, I really can't go through these, but many anti-tau studies and other studies harnessing the immune system. Again, if anybody's interested in these, we're happy to clarify what's available and where it's available. As far as treating symptoms, this is still important. Slowing down the disease, arresting the disease, yes, we want that. Reversing the disease, we want that. But meanwhile, people have symptoms. And until 2019, there was nothing new approved anywhere in the world for treating symptoms until this compound, oligomanate, or called GV971, which is a purified plant extract. It's an extract of seaweed, and it alters the gut bacterial composition such that in the brain, there is less of an inflammatory state. The magnitude of symptom benefit, the time to symptom benefit was earlier, greater than what we see in the currently approved symptom treatments, and the effect lasted longer. So we are now in the midst of enrolling volunteers to try this plant-based extract at Toronto Memory Program and other sites around the world outside of China. And this is a compound for people who are symptomatic, but who cannot tolerate or are not on, for whatever reason, didn't get benefit from the usual background Alzheimer's medications. I'll say a word about the non-Alzheimer's dementias, because if I don't, I know that people will ask. Parkinson's disease dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, these are important diseases with severe morbidity, but they are less common than Alzheimer's disease, no less deserving of attention. But unfortunately, the research is not as eloquent, has not caught up to the Alzheimer's research as yet, and they have been largely ignored. That is changing. Part of the problem with these diseases is that we haven't been able to diagnose them as precisely with biomarkers. So we don't have the equivalent to an amyloid scan for FTD. The tau scans that we have for Alzheimer's are specific for the tau in Alzheimer's disease, even though frontotemporal degeneration is a tau disease. It's a different type of tau. We don't have a tau tracer for it. With Lewy body disease and Parkinson's disease dementia, the offending protein is alpha-synuclein. It is not amyloid or tau, and we do not have alpha-synuclein scans as yet. However, antibodies to remove alpha-synuclein protein are under development. These are exciting, and other approaches for Parkinson's disease and DLB are being tried, and we have an open label study right now with a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, that's the PDE9 that you see. Very exciting in that this is, rarely does one get a chance to join an open label trial. This is recruiting only until mid-July, but very exciting for people who are symptomatic with Lewy body disease or Parkinson's disease dementia. And in frontotemporal degeneration, a very, very important approach is being tried, silencing the gene that produces the tau protein. And this will have major implications if successful for this disease and for other diseases. So now in the last few minutes, I want to talk about what will happen as we have greater ability to diagnose and to treat Alzheimer's disease. And this is just a matter of time. This is coming. But are we ready for it? If Atocanama was approved tomorrow, we would not be ready. Or if it was lecanemab or Dynamab, we would not be ready. We need the public to be aware of what's available and to understand who it's available for. We need to improve the knowledge base of the family practitioners and the specialists so that they can identify the people who would benefit from the drug and be aware of diagnostic technologies and referral sources to get people to the drug they deserve. We need improved access to technology, so amyloid scans or spinal fluid examination need to become more mainstay. Once we have blood tests in routine practice, again, that will enable our family practitioner colleagues to participate more readily in the process. Retinal scans, hopefully that will also be part of the technology rollout. And we need improved access to memory specialists. Waiting a year to see if you qualify for a drug like Atocanama is just a non-starter. I mean, people progress over a year and time is lost and brain cells are lost. So having, 1 year or longer wait list is not acceptable. We also need access to infusion centers. We don't want people with Alzheimer's disease or in prevention studies for Alzheimer's prevention to go to oncology centers or hospital centers to receive their infusions. We would like to have standalone outpatient infusion centers where people can have the comfort and dignity of having their condition addressed by experts. And we'll need access to MRI scanning. We're fortunate in the province of Ontario that most people can get an MRI scan, but the demand for MRI scanning will be increased when we have people on these biologic drugs that need to have MRI scanning every few months, let's say. And then finally, we need sustainable funding for Alzheimer's disease treatment and care so that people from all walks of life can afford these medications and receive these medications. These are not to be just for an elite group who have the finances for them. So the solutions are in part education, a huge amount of education, and that's going on by many individuals such as myself and other groups right now to lay the groundwork so that when we do have a breakthrough, we can take advantage of it. We need to establish expert regional diagnostic and treatment centers of excellence and create new roles for people, whether it's nurse practitioners or other Alzheimer's disease care navigators. We need all hands on deck to play a role here. We would like to have Canadian labs for spinal fluid. Right now, we send spinal fluid to a wonderful lab, but it's in Amsterdam. We would like to have a Canadian lab, and also for the blood-based biomarker tests, we would like to have Canadian labs involved. It will just make for faster, more accessible and less expensive turnaround. Infusion centers, we're going to need to establish more of these. A program like ours can easily scale up and build out. We already have an infusion center. Other centers will definitely need to be created and built. And we need to work with the government and payers to change the funding model. So don't doubt progress, help accelerate it. Those of us who know this disease want to be involved. You need to let your politicians know that Alzheimer's disease is always on the agenda, should always be on the agenda. And for yourselves at a personal level, have a baseline memory test, join a registry to end Alzheimer's disease, undergo a cheek swab if you're interested in Alzheimer's risk, and absolutely join a clinical trial if you're so inclined. So everybody has a role to play. People from all walks of life, all ages. We're very collaborative, and we want to protect ourselves, our families, and next generations. And here are two wonderful people I work with, Justine Rayom and Lindsay Snow, who are really community educators. Their phone number I will leave up during the Q&A, and the email address, research@memorydisorders.ca. We will answer your questions. We will link you to trials either at our site or in your own geography if they are available. And now I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cohen, for such an informative and hopeful presentation. To our attendees, I'm sure you have many thoughts and questions after hearing Dr. Cohen. So we have approximately 15 minutes or so, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A box in the bottom of your screen or top of your screen, depending on your device. It's a little Q&A icon that you will see, and we'll answer those as best as we can. And as Dr. Cohen mentioned, she's going to leave the contact information up on the screen while we go through the Q&A so that you can take that information down as well. And then we will also have that available at our office in the future. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to share that. So now we're going to start our Q&A session, and we already have various questions. So the first question is, Dr. Cohen, NOHT, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease do not seem to fit under the mental health category. I always assumed that Alzheimer's disease was a mental disease. Please explain. Thank you.
That's a great question. There's a bit of philosophy and politics involved in that. Alzheimer's disease is a neurologic disease. It is a bona fide organic physical disease. The organ is the brain. And because the brain is also the seat of the mind and behavior, Alzheimer's disease has been lumped together historically with mental illness. This adds a huge stigma. People with Alzheimer's disease, for the most part, do not want to be lumped in with people who have psychiatric illness. Now, all diseases, whether they're psychiatric or neurologic, to me, deserve attention and care. However, for Alzheimer's disease, relying on funding through mental health, experiencing the additional stigma that goes along with people thinking you have a mental health disease rather than a bona fide brain disease is probably not advantageous. So I hope that sort of is the tip of the iceberg in answering your question. In my view, these should be considered separately.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Our next question is, are there other clinics other than the Toronto Memory Clinic doing the spinal fluid test?
Yeah, also a good question. There are a few. They are few and far between. They are generally specialist clinics. Family doctors are not doing these. Some of the specialists do these, but not the majority. So if you have a particular location or interest in mind, we will find out for you where the nearest memory clinic or specialty clinic is that is doing this. There are just a handful.
Thank you. The next question, I'm on 26 milligrams of, and I apologize because I'll probably say this word incorrectly, galantamine for 3 months.
Galantamine, yeah.
Yep, it works, I think, except for short-term recall. Will this continue forever? I'm 82 and healthy. Would the next step be Atocanama?
Yeah, fabulous question, and good for you for trying galantamine. So 24 milligrams is the best dose, and we think that this medicine continues to help symptoms right through from mild to late stage disease. So if you feel you're more yourself, there are things coming to you more easily, that's good. That's a sign that it may be working. It will continue to do that. However, the disease will continue to progress because the underlying amyloid and other processes in the brain are not touched by galantamine. If and when aducanumab is approved, it will certainly be approved with the understanding that people can remain on their background treatment. So if someone's on a symptom treatment like galantamine or donepezil or rivastigmine, aducanumab would be added, and then we would have the symptom treatment plus a disease slowing treatment. And we think that combination is badly needed.
Thank you. The next question, would existing standalone infusion clinics be utilized, or would you recommend dementia dedicated infusion clinics?
I think we're open to all proposals here because we want to make sure that availability is what it needs to be. It is possible for someone to have their diagnosis confirmed and treatment plan discussed in a specialty clinic, and then an individual being sent to a standalone infusion center to receive their monthly dosing. However, I do feel if the option permits, it's preferable to have the infusion center under the same roof or within the same setting as the specialty memory clinic.
Thank you. Would the future treatment of Alzheimer's disease be effective for those given a diagnosis of mixed dementia?
The answer to that is yes, probably. The diagnosis of mixed dementia, strictly speaking, means that someone has dementia for two reasons: Alzheimer's disease and coexisting cerebrovascular disease. And by cerebrovascular disease, I mean stroke. They can be accumulative small strokes or large strokes, It could be brain hemorrhage, could be a lot of white matter ischemic change. So there's a whole range of what cerebrovascular disease is. But if it's of a magnitude by itself to cause dementia and there is Alzheimer's disease, there's no reason why treating the Alzheimer's component wouldn't be helpful. So it may not be the final answer. There may be other things for vascular dementia that could be added on, but there's a lot of synergy between Alzheimer's changes in the brain and vascular changes. So treating the Alzheimer's component, we think, would be very helpful.
Thank you. Our next question, where can I get one of those great t-shirts?
We'll send you one. Let Justine or Lindsay know you'd like one. Small, medium, or large, male or female. And we have child sizes too. Thank you.
The next question, my mom, her mom and dad, and all her brothers and sisters have had Alzheimer's disease, but a few siblings had frontotemporal dementia and Lewy body dementia. Are they all related gene-wise?
That's a fascinating family tree. There is a relationship between Lewy body disease and Alzheimer's disease in two ways. The risk gene, the ApoE gene, is a risk gene for both diseases. Also, there is a very high co-occurrence of Alzheimer's changes, that's the amyloid change, and the alpha-synuclein change of Lewy body disease. So up to 30% or more of people actually have both diseases, and depending on whether their symptoms are more memory-based or more Parkinson-like, they may get diagnosed as having one or the other, but they actually have both conditions. In the study I mentioned that's going on now until July, for people with Parkinson's disease, dementia, and Lewy body disease, people are allowed to have both changes, and we're able to clarify in screening for the study what's going on. Is it one disease or two diseases? As far as frontotemporal degeneration, this doesn't really co-occur in any regular way with Alzheimer's disease. It's quite a different disease, usually a different patient population, more male than female, the opposite of Alzheimer's, more middle-aged people than older people, again, a different demographic age-wise. So that's a curiosity in the family tree as far as the FTD component. But FTD is more strongly heritable than Alzheimer's. So anybody with FTD can get genetic testing to see if there's a gene mutation that's actually causing their FTD. Sorry, complicated answer, complicated pedigree. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that question, further to my question, I should have mentioned they were late onset, but still disease started in the mid to late 60s.
For the FTD component, or yes. So again, I guess another thing that one should say is how sure are we that that was the diagnosis? Because there is a very accepted variant of Alzheimer's disease that looks like FTD with behavioral or personality change more than memory change. And so if we don't have diagnostic confirmation that this wasn't Alzheimer's, then again, in a family tree that has a lot of Alzheimer's, one would really wonder whether this person who was said to have FTD didn't just have an atypical variant of Alzheimer's. Again, I can't know without further, investigation, but that would be one thought going through my head.
Thank you. Just to confirm, current tests can now give a clear Alzheimer's disease diagnosis?
That is correct. The problem with the current tests is, number one, they're not that accessible. And if you access them outside of a research study, they can be expensive. So I'm thinking here in terms of the PET tracer. There are very few PET scanners across the country. The PET tracer that is specific for amyloid is only manufactured in certain locations and sent to PET imaging centers. And the cost outside of research is about $3,500. Nonetheless, where cost is not an issue, that is a very definitive test for Alzheimer's change in the brain. The spinal fluid test is much more readily accessible, although I mentioned not everybody's doing it. That's more physician skill and resources, not that it can't be done. It costs about, well, much less than a spinal tap, much less than a PET scan. It's about $600 for the spinal tap Alzheimer's biomarkers. 300 of that is the shipping to the lab in Amsterdam. The other 300 is the analysis in the lab. So you can see why a Canadian lab would be an advantage.
Thank you. So I'm just going to pause for a minute here just to mention that we're just past 11 o'clock. So, I mean, for those, if people need to leave, by all means, please do so. It's just, you click on the little leave button at the bottom or top of your screen. However, we are going to continue on for a few minutes longer to try to answer a few more questions. And thank you for those people who have to leave. Our next question, treating Alzheimer's disease, how promising is this?
It's very promising. It's been too long, and there are lots of people suffering with this disease right now who may not have the opportunity if they're too far along in the disease. However, this will be a reality of the 4 or 5 diseases that carry seniors off. Alzheimer's disease is the only disease right now without a prevention, without a disease-modifying treatment, and that will change. So people can survive breast cancer. People can, people with multiple sclerosis have lots of options for disease-modifying approaches that reduce the number of attacks and allow them to live successfully. People with HIV, when I was in training, they regularly died a horrible death. Now they can live with HIV counts almost undetectable, a very successful life. This too will happen in Alzheimer's disease. We need to push forward and make sure people understand research is the only way. There's no shortcut. Clinical trials are extremely valuable. Governments need to invest in clinical trials, and individuals need to partner with clinical trial centers, and we'll make it happen.
Thank you. And there's a comment here that says there is a site in London, Ontario, that does several of the clinical trials mentioned during this presentation as well.
Yes, I think that's very important, and it's always better to access a trial in your local geography to save yourself travel and other inconveniences. Every clinical trial site is important, but a little bit different, and in terms of the menu of trials, the breadth of trials they offer, but also the resources they have to enroll volunteers. So a trial site that can only enroll a handful of volunteers may not provide the opportunity to all of its citizens in its local geography. So absolutely, that's the first place to go, but it's not necessarily the last stop. We can be very helpful in directing people to where different studies are being conducted and seeing what the ability is. Also, not all trial sites that run the same studies start at the same time. So let's say the AHEAD prevention study, we're expecting to start enrolling subjects within the next month or 2. At the site in London, I don't know. Some of the sites are much delayed and could be 6 months later. So again, or they may be sooner, and that would be wonderful. But just so you have your eyes open here, that we will help you find the best information, because there's a lot of difference between research sites, and especially if they're located in a hospital, they have additional challenges right now during COVID.
Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Cohen. Can we get the cheek swab done during COVID?
Yes, great question. We originally said, no, this is way too dangerous, can't do it, not good for our staff. To have people come on site and not good for participants. We've learned a lot during COVID and using all the precautions. We are offering cheek swabs. We're not doing them at community events. We're making appointments for individuals to come to us and have it done. But we have many people regularly having cheek swabs, and we use all the protection needed. Plus, the majority of our staff have received their first vaccination dose for COVID-19. So it's, that makes it more comfortable for people to come to us. So if you're interested, please take advantage of the opportunity.
Wonderful, thank you. And our last question is great talk and very informative, and appreciate Dr. Cohen giving her time to keep us informed.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. I guess there's nothing to answer there except to say thank you.
Yes, so that's a great way to end the Q&A. So thank you to everyone for providing those questions and clarifying a lot of things for us. I just want to, at this point, I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Cohen, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge and expertise with us. We know your presentation will stimulate further conversation. And to our attendees, we want to just thank you so much for attending our webinar today. We also just want to mention that next month, we are going to welcome Laura Geddes and John Morrissey from Siskins for a Next Brain Matters webinar. And the title is Know Your Rights and Responsibilities, Capacity, Power of Attorney, and Estates. And you can go to our website to register for this event. And I also just want to mention an upcoming event. It's the Walk for Alzheimer's event. Before we want to point out that just like our webinars, the programs and services provided for our clients are free, and donations to help support our mission are always appreciated. So if you would like to create a team for our upcoming event, we're going to obviously be doing this virtually this year. Please gather as many people as you can. You can do it in your own space safely. And we appreciate everyone's participation, and hopefully that the weather will be on our side. And if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to contact us directly, either via phone, or you can certainly email us directly as well. And again, I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. And just before you leave the event, there is going to be a short survey when you exit the webinar. And if you could just take a couple of minutes, it's not very long. We would really appreciate your input about our webinars and any future suggestions that you may have for our future webinars. And if anyone has any trouble leaving the event today, again, there's like a little red button, the leave button or end button on your screen, depending on your device, either at the top or bottom of your screen. You may have to move your mouse around as well. And again, thank you so much again for joining us today. And I hope that you enjoyed this lovely day. It looks like we have sun, at least in London we do. So I'm hoping that the sun either is shining or will be shining. So take care of yourselves and be safe. And we look forward to seeing you again at another event. Bye for now.